Hi, welcome to the Libro.fm podcast, the monthly series where we talk to authors, narrators, booksellers, and more. I'm Karen.
And I'm Craig. On today's episode, we had the absolute honor of sitting down with one of the most prolific American authors of the last 30 years, James McBride, author of Deacon, King Kong, The Color of Water, and more recently, The Heaven and Earth Grocery Store.
What an amazing experience this was. I'm already smiling so hard just thinking about it.
I feel like when we were like, oh, okay, bye, James, and hung up, we both were just like, ugh.
Good.
Yeah, it was amazing.
James is absolutely phenomenal. Our conversation covered so much ground. I got a lot of good writing pro tips that I've already been implementing a few of. I'll tell you what they are at the end
Nice.
After the interview.
A little teaser.
Yeah, but I can't handle how much I enjoyed meeting him and speaking to him, and how much I loved his new book that we talk about, The Heaven and Earth Grocery Store.
Yes. It was amazing, but also slightly intimidating. I was, when we were doing our preparations for the podcast, I was looking at photos and watching some videos, and I was like, oh, here's James being interviewed by Oprah. Oh, here's James hanging out with Obama. Oh, here's James playing in a band with Stephen King. And I had to be like, hi, my name's Craig. Nice to meet you. I have a podcast. So it was a little hard act to follow.
We were a little in over our head, but he was so gracious with us, and he treated us as if we were Oprah. It was the same thing, which was really nice.
Are we not Oprah?
We are not.
Remember when we were writing the lightning round questions, and one of the questions I wanted to ask was, who was a better interviewer, Oprah or Karen and I? And you would not let me ask it. You struck it from the record.
I'm not in a place for hard truth right now.
All right. Well, without further ado, why don't we let the podcast get rolling? And as always, we will stick around at the end to talk a little bit more about our experience, what we're listening to, and what episodes are coming up. If you do not follow the podcast yet, please do. If you do already, thank you. Please rate, review, subscribe, tell a friend. And if you're not a Libro member yet, you can get 2 audiobooks when you sign up if you use the code Libro Podcast.
All right, everyone, enjoy the interview.
So welcome to the podcast, James. We could not be more excited that you're here and able to make time to sit down with Karen and I to discuss your writing and more.
Well, thank you. Nice to meet you.
Awesome. Yeah, we're honored to talk to you in general, but especially thank you for making time. We know you have kind of a big week next week with the new novel coming out. We've got a lot of questions about that. But before we kind of jump into those, we'd love for you to introduce yourself for our listeners and just share a little bit more about who you are and what you've been up to.
My name is James McBride. I'm a writer of books and erstwhile composer of music. And my newest book is called The Heaven and Earth Grocery Store. Essentially, it's about equality. We can talk about the specifics of what the plot involves, but essentially that's what the book is about. It's about the desire for people to live in a community where equality exists. I mean, it's not a lecture book, it's not a textbook. It's a novel and characters do things and so forth. But that's at bottom, that's what the book is about.
Well, first off, congratulations on the upcoming release. At the time of recording, it comes out in just a couple of days on August 8th, I believe. Like you said, The Heaven and Earth Grocery Store. And Karen and I were both lucky enough to receive an early copy to prepare for chatting with you. So we've both been reading it and loving it. For folks who are not as lucky as Karen and I to receive an early copy, we'd love if you could tell us a little bit more about the premise and what people can expect when it comes out in a few days.
Essentially, the book is about a Jewish couple named Moshe and Shona Ludlow who find themselves trapped in a little bit of a dilemma. The couple that work with them, a Black couple, have a nephew who's 12 years old and he's deaf, and the state wants to take him away and put him in an insane asylum. This takes place in 1936 in Pottstown, Pennsylvania. And Chona decides to hide the boy from the state until this couple can ship him down to South Carolina where they have relatives. So the book is all draped around this whole business of this Jewish couple in a small town in an anti-Semitic situation find themselves kind of falling in love. This woman falling in love with this little boy who, she took in because she knows all of her customers. She runs a grocery store called the Heaven and Earth Grocery Store. So the kid ends up working in the store, and the book is based around the whole business of the state trying to find the kid, and her and the Black community around her doing what they can to prevent that from happening. And then the fallout from that, as the plot rolls out, and during that time, we learn a lot of things about what life in small town America was like for people who lived in the less than sweet part of town, because both Chona and her customers live in a section of town called Chicken Hill. Chicken Hill, there is a real Pottstown, there is a real Chicken Hill, but this is a novel, just so that the people of Pottstown don't get mad. But look, small town America in 1935, 1940 was not the Mayberry of the Andy Griffith Show, where everyone was happy go lucky, and the boys were boys and girls were girls and men were men and women were women and all that other puff and smoke that's part of the American mythology. There was a lot that went on that people really didn't know about and paid attention to. So you're just trying to show, at least I'm just trying to show, how people manage to get along in community, and how they learn to accept differences without making a too big a deal of it. So that's what it's about.
You sort of alluded to it in what you were just talking about with the premise. There's so much history in this book, and a lot of specificity around location and all the different cultures that are represented in it. How much research did you have to do? How much research did this book require, and how did you go about that?
Years of research. I started researching this book probably in 2008.
Oh, wow.
When I was writing The Good Lord Bird. It's just a full-time job. I went to Norristown State Hospital. I spent several months in and out of that place. The people, they were kind enough to let me in, and I got to know a lot of the people who worked there, the people who ran it, the administrators, social workers, psychologists, doctors. I even met, even saw some of the patients and actually chatted with a couple of the patients. I mean, the research, the writing of the book, didn't take. I wrote the book over the summer, but the research took years.
Wow.
Because 90% of what you come up with when you research something, you don't use. You're just using that small 10% that really tell the story. At a certain point, the book pushes into this whole business of the marbles. Like Chona gives out a marble, and then there's a green one and there's a blue one, and kids play with, and da da da. The small stuff. The smaller your story, the better it is. So, to do a big book like this, you have to really research. If you want to write a book that people are going to read, because you don't want to write a boring book that How many writers I've met that's just so interesting and nice, and they tell funny jokes, and then you read their books, it's just like really boring.
Mm.
Part of the reason is because, well, I can't tell you why. I can only say that I I can only say that you just shouldn't tell every joke you know. And if you tell that joke one time, you can't use it again.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I've been doing this a long time now, and I, learning to write with economy and cutting the fat out of your stuff, and learning to not to fall in love with your ideas and not fall into love with your words is something that takes a lot of experience.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. That's great advice for the writers out there listening. I started reading this in the paper copy that we received, and I really quickly was like, I have to hear the audiobook for this. It seems to me like this must have been the Everest of narration jobs, because there is such a breadth of personas and age ranges and emotion in this book. Um, I really quickly fell in love with Dominic Hoffman, who is the narrator of this book. I think he did an amazing job. And Craig and I saw that he's narrated other work that you've put out in the audio format. So we wanted to ask you a little bit about what it's like working with Dominic, and why you choose to keep working with the same narrator.
Well, you stay with the horse you rode in on. I mean, he narrated a couple other books that I did. I've never met him, but every time it comes up, they ask me if I want to narrate my own books. The answer is always no. But I always wonder if he's available, because he's so good. And one of the good things about him is that he works hard on pronunciation. He asks a lot of questions about characters, and he really study. Obviously, he's a very talented actor, and he realizes that the good book readers, people like the good book actors, are people who study not just the book and the plot, but they study the characters, because characters are, that's where the show begins.
Mhm.
So I always prefer him, because I know he's going to do a great job. I've never met him. I've never shaken his hand or her hand, however he or she refers to him as herself, whatever. But that's a person with a lot of talent.
Yep.
Um,
That's amazing. I was wondering, if you it just felt so fluid. The audiobook just felt like an absolute extension of the paper copy I was holding. And so I was just assuming that you knew this person really well and we're sitting in the recording booth, like workshopping with them.
no, no, I mean, uh, look, an artist that knows his or her business will just do it. You see it in auditions and in music all the time. If they just know what they're doing, they come in, the baton falls, the anvil drops, whatever it is, they just hit. And when it's done, they put their hat on and leave. And he's one of those kinds of people who obviously has a respect. And look, any artist um, who knows their craft um, has to be a deeply well-read person. You can't write books without reading a lot of books. You can't play music without having listened to lots of music. You can't paint pictures without having gone to museums. And your life as a writer and as a person of who deals in storytelling means that you are a sponge, a sieve for information. So everywhere I go, I carry a notebook and a piece of paper, a pad, a notebook and a pencil. And I'm always writing down what I hear. And, I fill up these little memo books with stuff all the time, every day.
Thank you for sharing that. So you're about to be very busy. I saw that you're going on tour for the Heaven and Earth grocery store. It looks like you're heading all across the country, tons of different states. Um, I'm sure this is old hat for you at this point. Like you said, you've been in the game for a long time, but I assume it's got to be a lot of work, but also very rewarding to get to meet fans and interact with them. Can you tell us what your tours look like and what fans should expect in the coming weeks and months?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I normally just chat, when I appear somewhere. I don't read from the book very much. I chat about, the motivation behind the book, and why I wrote it. And I try to I'm not really looking forward to traveling
Mm,
across America right now, for a lot of reasons. For one, I've done it a lot, but this is part of the life. When you choose the life, that's what you choose. I've traveled a lot as a musician anyway, so I'm used to traveling. Um, it's that it's a little different now. And when I first started writing books some 35 years ago, however long it was, country was a lot different. People they just were a little different. They weren't as afraid, and they weren't challenged by so many things that exist now. On the other hand, it means that my job as a writer is even more important, because all writers, and I'm not just talking about myself, but people who write books that 8 people read, and people who write books that haven't been read yet, and young writers who want to write books, they're all beacons of light. And every one of those beacons they all need batteries. They all need to be charged. They all need a place to shine. And they all need to come together in a place where they feel like where there's comfort and there's community. And so when I appear in a place, or I show up in a town or a bookstore and an auditorium, wherever, I'm aware that there are young people and some not so young people who are interested in not just what I've written, but interested in writing themselves. And it's important that they get some sort of encouragement and some sort of knowledge that they are not alone, because we are under attack. Books are under attack, and this whole business of we banning books is just that's unacceptable. And in that regard, we have to be strong and say, well, that ain't going to happen. Well, look, you're not going to ban books. You can try. Nothing is going to prevent a librarian from taking a book and slipping. They'll say yes. Oh, sure. Okay. Well, we'll go. Nothing's going to stop a true librarian, from making a good book known to someone. They ain't going to do it. I mean, they'll say they will, but they ain't going to. Yeah. So, in that regard, when I travel around, I'm aware that, we live in a country now where anyone can pull out a pea shooter and or AK-40, whatever it is, and just shoot the room up, and that's the end of it. And so in that regard, some of us will fall, but all of us will not. And in that regard, this book that I've written, and all of the books that I've written, and all the books that people like me write, and there are many of us, are really about freedom of speech and about real freedom of speech, not this smoke and puff and cake ice and these people toss around, this poison, toxic stuff.
Yeah.
So I guess that's a long answer to your question, but
It's totally fine. I had a question later in our little script here. I wanted your opinion on this. So maybe we can just kind of jump into that a little bit more now, actually. I read in an interview that you did with NPR, I believe, that you went to public schools and you're a firm believer in their importance as an institution in this country. Given the uptick in book bannings and attacks on curriculum across this country, what place do you think authors have? What role do they have to play in this fight for an inclusive and fact-based education?
Oh, I mean, we're part of we're one of the bigger cranks. These words are, look, you could just, people use words in all kinds of ways, inclusivity and woke and all this other, some of this stuff is just toxic stuff. And you, as a writer, you have to learn to just to filter out a lot of this stuff and deal with the real things that count, which are, love, family, community, truth, honesty. So, you can't really legislate morality. You can't legislate what's right in someone's heart. If their heart is not right, then there's nothing you can do for them other than you can show them the way. But at a certain point, you just have to gently shove them aside and say, I'm going to drive the bus now. And if you don't like it, too bad. You can get off. And so, writers over the centuries have died, trying to show what the truth is, and that has happened in the past, and it will certainly happen in the future. But it's not going to stop the truth from showing itself. My name is just a group of letters grouped together, and someone else can take a group of letters and group them together and call them anything they want, and then assign their meaning to it. But a true writer and a true reader of literature understands when there's honesty in the room and when there's honesty on the page. And that's why I think I make a living writing books.
I have a couple of questions related to that. And these are from quotes that Craig and I came across while we were preparing for this. And one of them, you're talking about learning from failure. It was in a beautiful video that I think is on your website. And you kind of talk about it, not just with your writing work, but also with music and creative endeavors in general. You mentioned specifically a couple of books you've written that haven't been published, and a collection of short stories that you seem fairly adamant about not wanting to see the light of day. And so I wanted to ask you, as a writer, as someone who's trying to take the lens off of things and be this positive force, what is that kind of decision-making mechanism for you to say, I've put a ton of time and love and energy into this thing, but I'm gonna move on to the next thing. And to use your words to say, I'm comfortable with a failure, and moving on.
If I'm bored with it, or if I don't care, or if I find myself asking, why should I care? Then it's probably not worth showing to anybody. Generally, at my level, or at, given my experience now, if the character's not kicking around in my head while I'm riding the subway or driving a car or something, it's probably not working. You can tell, when you read pulp fiction, or books that you see at the airport, not all airports, but like if you go to like a pharmacy or something, you read and you pick up a book, it's like the writer has forced the story and onto the page, and they're just shoving the thing from the top to bottom, and they're just checking boxes. She fell in love with him, but he had freckles she didn't like, and so she moved on. I mean, it just, they're just shoving the story. The character's not moving from room to room. If See, there's always a deeper story that you're trying to tell. In the case of this book, Heaven and Earth Grocery Store, the deeper story is really about equality, and about really the love of a man that I once worked for, who was just extraordinary, and the children that he mentored and cared for, these disabled children. And I'm talking about a camp I worked at when I was in college. And I never forgot that experience. And that's really what powered the book, because I always said to myself, if I could just find a way to show a little bit of that magic that he did, it would just really work. But it had to fall into this whole framework of this Jewish couple who take in this Black kid, and the Black community kind of finds out. And then there's other people from different walks of life, Italians and Irish, and they're all kind of mixed in. But the pot works, the stew works, because the ingredient really is love and equality. And how that stuff is not really all a bunch of like happy-go-lucky stuff, but it works. It's like a car. A car works when there's snow, and it works when there's heat, and then because the ingredients make the car go. Especially if it's an electric car, you know. Um, so if I'm bored by it, or if I feel like the story is being forced along, I just drop it. I mean, when I wrote this book, I wrote several chapters that were all about this camp. And as I had one chapter after another, and they just weren't any good. I just felt like this looks like a book where you have to force yourself to keep reading. You kind of care a little bit, but not too much. But what else? What does he do next? And this is no good. So I just discarded it.
What does that editing process look like? If you took the time to write multiple chapters, obviously you cared about the characters and the story during the writing process. Is it you working with your editor, or is it just you go back and read the pages and just it's not working, so you take
Oh
it
yeah,
out?
yeah. When I have a book in it, it's clean. Yeah, I don't work with any editor. I just keep real simple. You wake up in the morning, you look at it, and you're not interested. You don't want to shove any further, because what you do is you do mini drafts. When you're doing the first draft, you cut and trail, and if the process of cut and trail is boring, then the book is boring. But if the process of cutting trail is a journey that even you are not really sure of, then you're onto something. So, when this book started many different iterations, many different ways. You always try, entry point is always tricky business. Where do you drop into a story, and where do you leave it? And so the entry point in this story was extremely difficult to find. And I tried a lot of different approaches. So the one that worked was really, it was chapter 5 or 6 in one of the early drafts, with this Jewish theater owner who donated the land for this camp. Just meets his wife, and I realized at a certain point that these are the only pages that have life. And so I just discarded the rest and just dealt with the pages that had life, and that really rolled into Chona and Nate and Addie. That was really the entry point into the story. The entry point into a story is crucial. If you're writing a story about, a boat, what part of that journey are you going to start? You're going to start at the end and then, go back, or you're going to start in the middle, start at the beginning. Is the beginning when the boat was being made? Or was the beginning when the boat was leaving port? Was the beginning when the boat was an idea of some? I mean, it just depends. And the smaller bite the smaller your bite, the bigger your story. I mean, Herman Melville's Moby Dick is a story about a guy who just got a job on a boat. Now you could do that as a 10-second TikTok video, find yourself, famous for 10 seconds. Or you could sit down and figure out how to make it to a really, really great story about humanity. And that involves research.
Yeah, I love the entry point. Like you mentioned, you were kind of struggling finding the right entry point for this book, and I feel like it was perfect. Like talking about her medical issues and her disability and their business getting off the ground. It was like you're immediately hooked. Like I was like 20 pages in and just like, well, here we go. Like, so I think you picked the right one for sure.
Well, I hope so. I mean, that was all organic, That all just rolled out because Moshi and Chona were strong characters, and they had a strong story, had a strong backstory. They were a Jewish couple who owned a grocery store in a small town, and he was running a theater, and he was trying to not to make waves, and she didn't care about that. She was the magic one, and her magic and her ability to see beyond where she was is what powered the book. And in real life, that's what happens as well. It's the far thinking ones, the ones who think ahead of us, that who we later look back and say, oh my God, they really did. I mean, not to get too much into politics, but the guy who's running the country now is a far thinking individual. He's too old, blah, blah, blah. Look, put him on a walker and let him keep doing what he's doing, because he sees beyond what we see. Now, I'm not a politician, and I don't care how you vote. Your voting is your business. But I know how I'm going to vote and how I'd like to vote. I want people who can see tomorrow, who say, these are the obstacles ahead. I don't want a lot of smoke and puff about how great we are and all this other bullshit. That's for somebody else. So in books, when characters are strong, they see what other people don't. And Chona, for all her faults and flaws, and she had many, she didn't follow the precepts of Jewish life the way she should have. She broke a lot of, she talked up in the synagogue when she shouldn't have, and she was a piece of work, but she saw the wider picture. And those who see the wider picture can take a story a long way. And in Heaven and Earth Grocery Store, Chona and Nate, and to some degree Isaac, Moshe's cousin, are people who could see far. They see ahead. They say, this is what the land's going to look like. This is what the mountain is. I see the mountain ahead. Other people don't, but I do. And those are the kind of people that you can heave a story into the future. You can heave a story. 500 pages deep, they can take you. And that's why novels are just like real life, in some ways better.
I wonder if what you're talking about ties to this other quote I wanted to ask you about. We found this quote where you said you have to emphasize the positive. Otherwise, why write about people at all? And that resonated with both of us so much. And it's very apparent that that's important to you in the Heaven and Earth grocery store. We were wondering if you could just say a little bit more about why that's become so important to your writing and kind of how that's evolved over time.
Man, I like people. I don't want to write. I don't want to write about somebody who's, shooting somebody all the time, or always sick, or just pathologically pitiful and just staggering through life, just not sure whether she should jump out the window or take her son to lunch. I'm not the kind of guy who can do that kind of stuff. I mean, I suppose I could, but I don't want to. I want someone who's going to inspire me, because I'm inspired by people. I mean, I'm inspired by people who I don't even agree with politically, and some of them are my friends. I like them. I don't like how they vote, but I like them still, and they're funny. They tell jokes, and we have fun. We fix cars together and stuff. I mean, if you like people and you you think the best of people, and you know that people are doing their best, it's hard not to put them in your books. Look, we have to try to create a situation where we just say, you know what, I made a mistake, and I'm sorry, and then it's all good. I try not to hold people to account for for the world that they happen to step into, because we all make mistakes. We all say the wrong thing. We use the wrong pronoun now. I mean, all kinds of stuff. I mean, who cares? If, as long as your heart is good, you got to learn to let stuff go and keep the good stuff. Otherwise, you're just going to be mad all the time, you know? So I filter out a lot of that stuff from my life. I don't, and I like people who tell jokes and are funny. And I really, honestly, I don't care how they, I mean, I don't care how they vote. I know, I hope their people lose, but, you know, I got a lot of friends. I mean, who, I can call 2 o'clock in the morning, they'll show up. Now, if you mention politics, they'll get all bugged out. But after a while, that goes away and they go back to who they really are. And it's, you know, it's just how I've lived, and how people in my life have lived.
Well, on that note, we're going to move into a segment that Craig and I have called the lightning round, where we have a series of, I don't know, Craig, like 6 questions, something like that,
Yeah.
where we're just going to rapid fire them at you. Don't have to think too much about them. These are a little sillier, but if you're game, we'll get started.
All right, let's go.
I have the first one. What's the best nickname you've ever had?
Um, Cuddy.
Ooh, how did you end up with that nickname?
I used to work with a singer who used to call me Cuddy, which was kind of short for cousin. And then musicians that I got to know through her called me Cuddy, and some of them still call me Cuddy.
Awesome.
I mean, I've had several nicknames, but that's the one. I suppose it's my favorite. I don't know.
Yeah.
The most recent.
Yeah. Speaking of music, who's your favorite jazz musician of all time?
Oh, it changes, but it's probably got to be John Coltrane. Because I have a connection to him. My father and John Coltrane were from the same town in North Carolina. My mother's buried in the same cemetery as John Coltrane's mother, and
Wow.
my father and John Coltrane went to the same high school. And I've been a big fan of Coltrane. Wonderful
No,
storyteller.
I don't have to listen to Love Supreme right after this interview.
Not a bad choice. Not a bad
Yeah.
choice.
Do you collect anything? And if so, what do you collect?
I used to collect typewriters, but I got tired of that because it was so heavy to move around. And
Yeah.
um, that's the main thing. I don't really collect much of anything else. Um,
Awesome.
While I'm preparing for this podcast, I saw a lot of photos where you were wearing a bow tie. So my question is, bow tie or necktie?
Bow tie, absolutely. Yeah.
I saw a lot of photos with a lot of different bow ties. Do you, speaking of collecting things, how many bow ties do you think you own?
Well, I've owned up to like 20, but I'm down to like 4 or 5. Um, I was touring at one point and we all had bow ties, and I stopped touring and I just would leave them places. They're expensive though, you know.
Yeah.
So um, yeah, but I prefer bow ties.
Okay, last lightning round question. What is something that you're always recommending to other people?
The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich by William Shirer, a book.
Oh,
William Shirer, I think, is SHE. I forgot how to spell his name, but that's a profoundly great book. I mean, he wrote that book when he was on the outs with CBS. He was a correspondent for CBS News. And everybody talks about Edwin Murrow and they name schools and stuff, but William Shirer, who wrote the Rise and Fall of the Third Reich, happened to be in Germany before World War II broke out. And he saw the rise and the fall of the Third Reich. And his book is really relevant to now because, you see the rise and fall. You see how Hitler came to power, and then you watch how it pings into today. And you have you see how you see how important it is to pay attention to what's going on in this country right now.
thank
I
you
think
so much for that
that's the book.
recommendation.
Yeah, yeah,
Awesome. I'm going to go get that immediately after this.
yeah.
One last question that we have for you before we kind of start wrapping things up here. So we typically do something that we call Instagram story time, in which we go through your social media and find a photo or a tidbit that we wanted to ask you more questions about. And I think, Craig, you're going to take this one away this week.
So I did take a look at your Instagram and I found a video that I was very interested in. But then I also saw a photo of you in an all black suit with a white bow tie, standing with your hands clasped in front of you, standing next to President Obama. And I had to skip Instagram and go off script with this one. And I would just love to hear what that experience was like, because the photo is amazing. And
It's so good.
for folks who haven't seen this photo, it was in 2016 and you were winning the National Humanities Medal, being presented with it from Obama.
Man, that was so cool. Well, first of all, be honest with you, I don't really, I don't. Somebody runs my Instagram page for me. I'm just confessing.
Well, good thing we skipped it then.
No, that's all right. I mean, I know they put stuff on it, but I'm not really that big an internet person. In part because I'm trying to keep my own ideas. I don't really want to know what somebody else is thinking. But yeah, that was great meeting President Obama. He was fantastic. He was. I mean, it was like it was just surreal. The White House and all that. The band played, and he was very. I mean, look, we didn't have a deep conversation. We said, "Oh, do you like basketball?" No, I mean, there was nothing that there were a lot of us there,
Yeah.
not Mel Gibson, but Mel Brooks was there and Terry Gross was there. I sat next to Terry Gross.
Oh,
That's pretty cool.
Great. It was great. And then he said to me 3 words. He said, "I appreciate you." That's it. So I was a big joke with my siblings, because I'd go over and they'd say, "Hey, James, come here, get over here. I appreciate you." So it was nice. It was very nice. I was very proud, I wish, my mother had seen it, But I've met several presidents. I met both George Bush Sr. and Jr. They were wonderful people. Barbara Bush, Laura Bush, I like all them Bushes. I don't care if that insults you too bad. They're wonderful people. And I met President Joe Biden at a funeral of a colleague of mine, a great writer named Richard Ben Kramer. And now President Biden was vice president. And he came and he spoke. I mean, he wasn't famous. I mean, he just came because he respected and he spoke wonderfully. It was just great. He's a man. He's a great guy. He's a great president. I don't care if people disagree with me or not,
Yeah.
My job is to tell the truth. And I'm so glad he's helping put this place back together.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing that story. It's just as amazing as I had hoped it had been. So, yeah, I mean, what an amazing experience.
Well, James, before we let you go, one of our very important questions, the one we want to follow up with here, do you have anything you're reading right now and enjoying that you can recommend to us and our listeners?
Yeah. I'm reading a book by a guy named Matthew. It's Picard or Ricard. It's called Happiness. It's easy to find. He was like a French scientist or some sort of gene research or something. He quit it all and I suppose you could say became a Buddhist. And I really like this guy. I like what he has to say about happiness and about religion and about, like, I'm not a Buddhist and I'm not against religion. I grew up in the church, I have great respect for all religions. But they all say essentially the same thing. The best parts of them say the same thing. And this guy, he kind of summarizes it in ways that I think are healthy. And you don't have to be a Buddhist. You don't have to, it doesn't matter what your religion is. There's a lot to be gained from it. I think that's a great book in terms of self-fulfillment and finding ways to understand what happiness is really, what happiness is really. And I think for people in our society, because we're so disconnected, we don't talk to each other anymore. Everyone goes to a Starbucks and they open their computer and they start typing away. What's the point of going to have coffee if you can't say hi to the people? I mean, what's the point of, going to a pharmacy when you're getting your meds or whatever, and then you go to a machine and you're clicking? I mean, if you want to be creative and, follow the great American legacy of creativity, which is really what this country is all about. I mean, free speech is only part of that. Creativity is what created the better parts of this country. If you want that, you have to go out and you have to talk to people. You have to participate. I participate, I still work with my church after all these years. I still go to projects every weekend. And some of it's frustrating, but some of it is just you can't find it by typing and Googling it. I have students, at NYU, I teach there. And the students, they Google stuff and they think they know it. You can't learn anything by Googling it. Better to go to the library, get out a few books, talk to the library, talk to people. You have to connect to people. If you want to be a successful writer, just get in the room. You don't have to like say anything, but just get in the room, just be in the room and watch and do what I do. Bring a little notebook around and write down what you see. So, when you have to write about a plumber, you'll know, Heaven and Earth Grocery Store has this whole business about the well at the end. There's a whole business about the well, and they gotta get into this well and deal with it. And the pipe burst open and the water's coming up. And are they gonna make? I don't know anything about wells. So I talked to a plumber about a well. Then I talked to another plumber, like a builder, about a well, and he started using language, and I learned the language. And now if you need a well built, you know to call me. Call me. I'll make your well all right. You won't be well, but you'll have it.
I'm picturing you calling a plumber to your house, and he's like, "What do you need fixed?" And you're like, "No, nothing. I just want to talk to you for a little bit. Just want to pick your brain."
Want to talk
no,
wells.
you don't do that. No, that's too expensive. No, you figure out. Maybe you call him for something else, and then give them a soda, and then you talk to people. I mean, I talk to people. I take the subway, the bus. I'm still around, like even though, like I said, my politics are probably progressive or left or moderate, but I got plenty of right winger friends, and they know a lot. I mean, they have a lot to. I've learned a lot from them, including decency and goodness. When you judge, if there is judgment, there is no journey, both in books and in life. You can't judge people. At a certain point, you have to say, okay, my way is the highway. At a certain point, but that point, should come a long way off, because sometimes you're not right, and there's that too.
James, we could not thank you enough for spending the last 45 minutes with us. I feel like I'm going to go into my day with a much more positive outlook. I'm going to go to the Starbucks downstairs and not take my phone out. So I really appreciate the time and energy and just your words over the last hour. So wishing you the best of luck on the tour. I hope it's not too trying and that you get to meet lots of great people, and I'm sure the book will do well. So congratulations again.
Well, thank you very much. And I appreciate it's very nice to meet, young people like yourself. You make me feel hopeful for tomorrow. We have done a very good job of leaving. We've left you a lot to work with, but on the other hand, you have a lot to work with. So in terms of your ability and curiosity and thirst for betterness. So it's a pleasure to meet you. And well, there it is.
In the words of Terry Gross, James, we appreciate you.
No, that was Obama. That was Obama.
That was
yeah.
Oh.
Well, I want you two to know something. I'm just really I appreciate you. No, thank you. All right, thanks a lot.
Nice to meet you too. Bye.
Thank you, James.
All right, take it easy.
Well, everyone, thank you so much for listening to that interview. I hope you enjoyed it. I know Karen and I were obsessed with this one. We talked about it the second we hung up. Just like, I feel like my nerves were tingling. It felt so good.
I'm still writing on the high of him calling us like nice young people. That was one of the best compliments ever. And I just love him.
Yeah. It was fun to get to talk to somebody who's won an award from Obama and ask him, bow ties or neckties?
Yeah. But also to hear his Obama impression at the end. I love that.
Yeah, it was pretty good.
I appreciate you. I've been saying that a lot since we talked to James.
Oh, man.
Well, Craig, dare I ask you what you're reading? Can you go first this week?
Sure.
Great.
So if you listened to our last episode, we interviewed Nadia, who runs the Storygraph. And one of our questions was, have you ever reread a book? Because some people do, some people don't. And she said, I never used to reread books, but I recently reread my first reread, and it was The Secret History by Donna Tartt. And I think we were like, oh my God, what a great book to reread. Everyone on the Libro team has reread that book probably. So I picked it up and I reread it again.
Yes, I love it.
So inspired by Nadia, I had spent the past couple of weeks rereading The Secret History, and the return to Hampton College and the world of collegiate murder was a very fun escape after some more kind of intense or, whatever books that we've been reading for the podcast or whatever. So it was a nice little escape.
I was going to make the joke and say spoilers, but then I knew you would say, it's about a murder from the first sentence of the book.
Yeah. It literally says like chapter 1, Bunny was dead to begin with. That's Dickensian. That's a Christmas Carol, I guess. But
so reread was just as delightful as the first time through.
Yeah, definitely. I brought it all over. I read it in like a beer garden and just everywhere. I read it, brought it. It was with me every place I went. So it was a lovely little escape. And I love that book. It's fun.
That's great.
You're a fan of this book, yes?
Oh, big time. Yeah, absolutely. Who's your favorite character?
Definitely not Bunny. Wasn't that sad at his passing? Pretty annoying. Maybe Henry. Honestly, yeah, fun character. Julian is fun. The professor, he's very quirky.
Henry is also my answer. Big Henry fan.
Yeah. Richard's pretty annoying.
He serves his purpose in the book as the kind of normal dude who's been thrust into a strange situation.
Yeah. I also just
Ishmael.
how calculated and kind of like schemy Henry is. It's a fun character. Yeah. Now I want to reread it again.
You should wait like a year.
Yeah, it's insanely long. I think on audio it's like 22 hours or something. It's pretty long. Yeah. I don't know I forgot how many pages. It's got to be over 500, but it's a long one. So
that woman I love that I've talked about on the podcast before, V.E. Schwab, and I talked about her, Liberty Hardy, who reads hundreds of books every year and has a newsletter every week about what she's reading and enjoying. She actually does an annual rereading of The Secret History, and I look forward to hearing her talk about that every year. So you can join her.
I love it. I am going to read the other Donna Tartt books. I believe there's 2 other novels. I haven't read either. I know that one of them, Goldfinch, is that right? Is one of your favorites, right?
Yes, I love Goldfinch.
Yeah, so maybe that's what I'll do next.
Yay! I can't wait to hear what you think.
I will let you know on the podcast. And with that, I would love to know what you are currently reading.
You're going to be happy to hear this. I just read one of Jen Began's books. So folks who have been listening for a while may remember that when Big Swiss came out earlier this year, I believe, Craig and I both excitedly read that and both really, really enjoyed it. And I loved the author's writing style so much that I've been dying to read more of her work. When I went to the library recently, it happened to be there on the shelf and I was super excited. So I just read her book, which is called Pretend I'm Dead. And it's about a cleaning woman. That's a very high level synopsis.
The end. That's the end. You open up the jacket. That's all it says.
Yes. It's about a young woman. She's like 24. Her name's Mona. She's a cleaning woman. She falls in love with a man who has some very severe addiction problems. And then it kind of sets her on this strange journey across the United States, meeting a very odd cast of characters that resonate a lot with the parts that we liked about Big Swiss.
Nice.
It's a really quick read. I think I read it in like a day or two, but really, really loved it. And so now I'm actually holding it because I'm not very far in, but it's called Gone to the Wolves by John Ray. And I'm holding it up. I know, Craig, you've seen this, but the cover is just so cool. It looks like a metal album, and the letters are in this sort of holographic vinyl. It's very glimmery in the light. And this book is about 3 people. I think it kind of follows them through their lives. 3 friends that meet in high school that are really into the metal music scene, like the underground metal music scene. They are in South Florida, and get into all kinds of hijinks. They grow up together, and it sounds like there's a lot in store for me. I see in the description that we're going to get into some doomsday cults of the 80s and things like that. So I'm
Love
ready.
a doomsday cult.
Yeah.
That sounds amazing. And I mean, that book falls into that category. I want to say that when we were at Book Catapult, we both looked at that book because the cover is just striking. Like you said, it's like black with like hologram silvery letters, and it looks like a black metal album or something. So you'll have to let me know how it is.
I'm really enjoying it so far. I haven't been able to put it down. And I've also gotten the audiobook so I can switch back and forth. And the audiobook is very compelling as well.
Nice. Well, I say this every episode, but when we're done recording, to the booksmith I go.
Tell them hello.
I'll try to get books that are actually out, as opposed to when I always go in there and ask for books that are like, that doesn't come out for 5 months. So hopefully both these books are out and you're not setting me up for failure.
I'm holding it in my hand. I can confirm that it
exists. You may have got an advanced copy and you're just trying to trick me.
No, this one's from the library. I had a great library haul this
you
past
do love
weekend.
A library.
It's the best. Thank you, public libraries.
Yes. Well, thank you for letting me know what you were reading. And for listeners, we are super excited about our next couple episodes. We teased one of them at the end of the last episode where we chatted with Danny Kane, who owns and works at Raven Bookstore and wrote How to Resist Amazon and Why. So that episode will be coming out after the James one, after this one that's out that you're listening to. It's not out at the time of recording.
It gets very confusing for us. Yeah.
We're not live streaming this outro right now. Yeah. And after that, we just had the opportunity to talk with Kelsey Norris, who has a debut book coming out, a collection of short stories called House Gone Quiet that Karen and I have both been reading and absolutely loving. And we thoroughly enjoyed the interview, and we can't wait for you to hear it.
Yes, all kinds of good stuff coming up. Thank you so much for listening. Thanks for coming back to hear our new adventures. If you haven't yet, please rate, review, and subscribe. Please tell a friend. And if you haven't signed up for a Libro.fm membership, you can use the code Libro Podcast, and you will get 2 audiobook credits for your first month instead of just 1.
And as always, thank you for listening.